Hi Equals, it's Kim. It's like 8:15 on a Friday morning, and it is already hot and yucky. But I wanted to spend a little bit of time just reflecting on the week. Folks in the LGBT community have felt, especially in Ohio this week, have felt a little bit on the defensive. And I get that. You know, there's a lot of talk about free speech and freedom of religion. And so, first off, my beliefs around those things, that yes, we have free speech. The Constitution guarantees you the right that your government, with some exceptions, if you read the First Amendment, you'll see those exceptions, but that the government will not infringe upon your free speech. It doesn't say that you're free from the consequences from your friends and your neighbors and your employers and your church or, whatever, of your free speech. So if you say something that your friends don't like, you can't say, well, there's freedom of speech. Yeah, but there's not freedom from the consequences of that speech except for from the government. Freedom of religion? Yep, everybody should be able to practice their religion. I don't think we should disparage anybody for their religious beliefs. However, people shouldn't be able to impinge on somebody else's pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness based on that religion. So if you are a religious business owner and you are open to the public, you should be open to all of the public. And I also believe that if you are a religious society or religious organization, so like a hospital, so here in Columbus, that might be Riverside, which is Methodist-based, or it might be Mount Carmel, which is Catholic-based, that you, if you are open to the public, that you need to be open to all of the public. And this includes like rental halls that might be run by the Knights of Columbus or something like this. Those are kind of my basic tenets of my beliefs around free speech and free religion. And back to free speech for a minute. Free speech, I believe, is also limited, or should be limited, when it creates a hostile environment. So an employer should be able to limit somebody's free speech based on whether they are creating a hostile environment for other people. And this is also true in schools. Kids need to feel safe in school, and so your free speech, and actually the courts have ruled this way, that your free speech is limited when you start to make this space, like a school or a workplace, feel unsafe for other people. Other things that have been problematic this week that we're reacting to. SB658 is still being talked about, called the Parental Rights Bill, and the idea is that it would require parental permission for a young person, minor, to receive any sort of gender transition treatment. Not only just custodial parents, but non-custodial parents, parents that might be in prison, parents, it's too wide scoped. And it's also misguided, in my opinion. Children often have bad outcomes when they are not affirmed in their gender identity. Not all. Some can make it to 18 and then they can do what they want. Some others can't. And I think we need to be cognizant of that. So, but in addition, 658 would also require governmental agencies like schools, hospitals, to out a child to their parents. And I've talked about before that if a child is not out to their parents, there's probably a really good reason they're not out to their parents, and the negative outcomes are just too likely to risk. Schools should refrain from outing a child. Hospitals should refrain from outing a child. Parents who are negative, who don't affirm, who are not accepting, who kick children out, use tough love techniques, just imperil their children. And it is our society's job, and my job as a Christian, I believe, to protect children. So what else? SB36. So this is the Pastor Protection Act. All of a sudden it got passed through the House. All right. For those of you who are political wonks, you can, we all know what happened. I don't need to say it here. But the Pastor Protection Act really, in terms of protecting a pastor's right to decide who they're going to marry, is totally unnecessary. The First Amendment already guarantees their right to decide who they will and will not marry. They've always had that right. In my belief, this is actually coming from pastors who are on their kind of their own independent churches and don't have a mainstream church behind them, and so they worry that if they got sued, that they don't have the legal resources of a mainstream denomination to protect them. Okay, maybe that's a concern, but the thing is, nobody's ever sued any pastor over whether or not they would marry a same-sex couple or an interracial couple or anybody. That is their right. So the Pastor Protection Act, in terms of that, was totally unnecessary. But it does a few other things. It also talks about religious societies have the right to discriminate, and they don't define religious society. So this could include Riverside, that I mentioned before, that's a Methodist society, or it could include Mount Carmel, which is a Catholic society. Without defining it, right, we leave this really open. And services like hospitals and first responders, EMTs, firefighters, police officers can't be discriminating in life and death situations. Okay, my rant. So, and then, on top of that, on the floor this week, Representative Seitz actually added in an amendment to that bill that said, that takes that part about religious societies as well as religious organizations and says that SB36 would overrule or override any other law in the Public Accommodations Code in Ohio, which is referred to as ORC 4112. So now this would open up, if HB36 were to get signed by the governor, it's not there yet, but it would open up the ability for religious societies not to just discriminate against LGBT people, but also to discriminate against maybe a Catholic society doesn't want Protestants, or Jewish people, or Muslims. Maybe a Jewish society doesn't want Muslims or Christians. It opens up the ability for them to discriminate based on race, based on national origin, based on sex. Right? That amendment is not just LGBT, it overrides all of our non-discrimination law in Ohio. Bad language. Bad idea. So, we'll keep you updated on where that goes in the future. And then there is Supreme Court Justice Kennedy's retirement. Now, I like a good conspiracy story like anybody else, and as for its entertainment value. But regardless of why Justice Kennedy retired, he's retired, or retiring. And there's really nothing we can do about him retiring. What we can do is get active. We just go back to work. We go back to educating people, in my case, about LGBT people. I want people to feel, to understand the law. I want people to know that their LGBT neighbor is vulnerable to certain bad behavior on the parts of other people, which is discriminatory or bullying or harassment. I want my neighbors, if they were to encounter a transgender person across the counter from them in a retail situation or a dining situation, to find that to be totally normal and totally comfortable, and not to be uncomfortable by something like that. And so that maybe that person can keep their job, and it's not something that the business owner feels is threatening to their customers in some way. We could solve some of these issues without the laws, just through education. And then the more the voters are educated, the more comfortable lawmakers are with putting protections into law for those few bad apples who still insist on discriminating against people, whether it's for their sexual orientation or gender identity or their race or their religion. It's important that we educate our neighbors what's important to us what's important to you. Keep talking, keep working, keep voting. There is an election in November. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, just saying keep voting. And if in your mind you've thought that you've made a vote in the past that might not have been conducive to how you wanted the world to be today, just keep that in mind when you go to vote in November. Have a good weekend, everybody. Talk to you later next week about more about LGBT young people. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. Hit the red subscribe button so that you get notified every time I put up a new video, which is generally twice a week, usually Tuesday and Friday. This week was a little different. Have a great weekend. Bye, equals.